Hi, I know what you're thinking. Another Angular course? And I gotta say, this one is different. In this course, we won't cover the absolute basics of Angular because, let's be honest, there are more than enough courses about the Angular basics out there. Instead, we'll focus on building a real-world web application with the tools Angular and Node.js provide. We will build an SEO-friendly blog, which means we're going to use Angular Universal to build a server-side rendered frontend. In the backend, we are going to use Node.js for the web service. We store our data in the Maria database, and to map our objects with the database, we are going to use the object relational mapping library Sequelize. And finally, we publish the whole thing on a Windows server with IIS Node. The web application itself will be a blog that could be extended to a big news or magazine web application. We start with displaying some articles, and later on we'll build an administration dashboard with authentication, we're using JSON Web Tokens to be more specific, and the option to create new articles, modify them, and so on. So every CRUD operation and more will be covered. I'm Patrick, and I will be your instructor for this course. With several courses on Udemy, over 30,000 students, 3,000 reviews, and over 15 years of job experience in this field, I know what's important to you. I don't want to waste your time, I want you to see results fast. So if you want to up your game in Angular and Node.js, this course is for you. Sounds good? I'm looking forward to seeing you in the course. Hello, welcome, and thank you very much for joining this course about building a real-world application with Angular and Node.js. The big goal for this course is to build your very own SEO-friendly blog with the Maria database in the backend. A quick note about the used Angular version. Since Google updates major versions of Angular quite often, I will update the Angular version in this course as well where it needs to be updated. So don't worry about getting stuck with old technology, you will learn state-of-the-art stuff. Now let's have a look at the upcoming sections of this course. The basic blog. In this section, we will start with our Angular project and develop the blog so that it will work offline without any web service or database. In essence, you could already publish this blog if you want to add all your blog posts within your Angular app. Meta and Open Graph tags. As the title may already imply, here we will add meta tags and Open Graph tags, so the information that search engines and social media platforms need to find your blog and display your articles properly when they are shared. Keep in mind though that these tags won't necessarily work if you stick with the client-side rendered Angular app. Google promised to be able to crawl client-side rendered Angular web applications, but by the experience of many blogs and developers, we are not there yet. Apart from that, social media platforms still need proper source code or tags to scrape your site properly. Angular Universal, a short but very important section. Here we will implement server-side rendering, or short SSR. That's what Angular Universal is all about. When you've finished implementing server-side rendering, your tags will be available in the source of your blog and your pages will also render much faster. Backend with Node.js. It's time for the backend. We'll create a new project, the web service with Node.js. Now the articles will come from the web service. Database and object relational mapping with MariaDB and Sequelize. We expand the web service and finally connect our web application with a database so that the articles are now stored in a Maria database. Additionally, we will use Sequelize for the object relational mapping between our models and the database tables. Administration dashboard. In essence, the blog works with all layers. We have the client, the web service, and the database, but adding new articles and modifying them is a bit cumbersome. So let's add an administration panel where we get an overview of all articles and where we can create, read, update, and delete them, This means building all CRUD operations. Authentication. The administration dashboard works, but until now, everybody could use it. In this section, we changed that by adding authentication with JSON Web Tokens. Also, we're going to introduce Angular interceptors, route guards, and a small middleware. IIS Node. Finally, we are able to deploy our blog. In this section, you're going to learn how to build and publish the Angular Universal Client and the Node Web Service on a Windows server with Internet Information Services. Bonus and updates. Apart from all the other sections, I will always try to keep the Angular version up to date and also add some bonus lectures if anything comes up in the Q&A sections, or if I have new ideas myself that I would like to show you. So that's what you're going to learn. Still, there's one more thing we have to do to be ready for the next section, and that's installing some extensions for Visual Studio Code. Let's do that right now. Alright, now before we actually start implementing our new application, our new blog, I would like to run quickly through some extensions I can really recommend when you want to develop an app in Angular and also developing an app in general with HTML, CSS, JavaScript and TypeScript, also C#, but this is not important for this course right now. So as you can see here, a bunch of extensions are already enabled, and the first one is VS Code Angular Files. Now this one, as the GIF already shows here, enables you to quickly generate components, services and so on with a right click. I don't use it that much, but maybe you think it's quite useful. Another one would be Angular Language Service. Now this one, as it states here, this extension provides a rich editing experience for Angular templates, both inline and external templates, including completions, lists, AOT diagnostic messages, quick info, go to definition, and so on. Sometimes quite useful, so I think you might want to have a look. Then a big one, the Angular snippets by John Papa. As you can see here in the GIF and also here in the description, there are some snippets. I use some of them, as you will also see throughout this course. So I can recommend installing this one. Now that's not that important. Angular 2 switcher, there are some shortcuts to switch between the TypeScript, CSS, HTML files, also the testing files. So for instance, if you are in the TypeScript file and you just press Alt and O on Windows or Shift Alt and O on Mac OS, you are going to switch to the HTML file as stated here. Alt I would be going to the CSS file if you are on the TypeScript file and so on. But actually I never really tried to remember those shortcuts, but when I saw it I thought might be quite handy. So yeah, if you think that's useful for you, please feel free to install the Angular 2 switcher. Another one quite important for me is the auto rename tag. Now this one, as you can see here, if you change the opening tag of an HTML tag, then the closing tag is also renamed, and vice versa. As you can see here, when you rename one HTML XML tag, automatically rename the paired HTML XML tag. So highly recommended. Another one, just for the cosmetics, is the bracket pair colorizer. I think this one, the name already explains what it's doing, so feel free to have a look at this one. Now we have some C# extensions, don't need them. Material icon theme. This is pretty nice, I think, because for instance, if you see the testing files of your Angular application and the component files, both are TypeScript files, but for instance, if this window is quite small, you only see the TS icon, but with this material icon theme, you really see an icon which tells you, okay, what kind of a file is this now? And the same for, I don't know, maybe all other files you can use. See here the JSON symbol, for instance, or the symbol for CSS, an Angular component file, and so on. So this is really nice, highly recommended. The next one would be Path IntelliSense. I like this one because it auto-completes file names. So when you're looking for a file, then you can use Path IntelliSense. Prettier is an extension that formats your code a bit, well, prettier. Not necessary, but quite nice, I think. And of course, last not least, TS-lint if you want to see errors in your code. So yeah, as I said, I just wanted to run through these extensions quickly, and when you installed some of them, you will see that classes or services are, for example, automatically imported. Quite handy. I think you are able to develop your application quite faster, and yeah, that's why I recommend installing them, and you won't get confused if you are following this course, because I will use all these extensions here. So I hope you liked them, and yeah, have fun installing and finally using them. Welcome to the basic blog section. In here we will build the basics of the client application. This means we will cover Angular routes, adding several components, styling with CSS or cascading style sheets, and working with Angular services. But first we will have a look at the versions of Node and Angular we are using in this course. As I already mentioned, this course was built with Angular 7, but where it's necessary, I will add changes to the code for the latest stable Angular version in an extra lecture. And that's how the blog will look like by the end of this section. Okay, I'd say let's start. Okay, now before we start creating our application and implementing everything for our blog, let's check our installed versions first so that we have similar environments here. So we go into our console. As you can see here, I have a folder ngblog course, and of course you can change that, but we are here for the version check. So let's have a look at the installed Node version. Okay, now Node is on version 10.15.3. What about npm 690? Now these two might not be that important for this course, but the next one will be. This is the currently installed Angular version, and you can see it with ng ---- version. And as you can see right here, the currently installed version and the version to this date, the latest one, is 7.3.6. Now, if you have another version installed, maybe while you're watching this course, version 8, 9, or any later version is already out, you can of course try to use this version of yours. And I will try my best to always update the code with the latest Angular version. But if you want to make sure that the code works, of course you can install Angular CLI version 7.3.6, although any later version is already out, and you can do this with npm install -g at Angular CLI add, and now comes the version you want to install. So npm install -g add Angular /CLI at 7.3.6. I'm not going to run this now because this version is already installed, but for you, this is the way to actually install this version. Okay, and now when we've done that, let's create our application, our blog actually. So we say ng new, and I will call this ngblog. So ng new ngblog, hit return, and Angular is asking us if we want to use routing, and yes, of course we want to use routing, and also which kind of style sheet we want to use, and we are going to use the plain old CSS. Okay, now when this is done, we can have a look at the generated files. We see that a new folder is generated, ng-block. We have our source folder structure, app folder, and so on. As I already said in the introduction, this is not a course for the absolute Angular or TypeScript or JavaScript beginner. I will not explain in detail what a component is, what data binding is, event binding, and so on. I will just use the stuff Angular gives us, all the directives, all the different kinds of bindings, and so on, and tell you how you can use them to build your own blog actually. So please bear with me when I'm not going into deep details. I will explain a little bit, but again, this is not an absolute beginner's course. I think there are great beginner's courses out there, so I hope you already have a little bit of knowledge regarding Angular, TypeScript, and so on. So back to the files. As you can see here, everything is generated for us. We can also see the cute icons I like with the material theme extension. And now I would just say, let's have a look if the app is already working. We will change the directory first, of course, and then we will run the app with ngserve, and with -- open, we will also open the current browser. Angular is running on its default port 4200. Compiled successfully, Chrome is starting, and the application works. Great, now we are prepared for the actual implementations for our blog. Okay, so the app is running and working, but before we actually build all the basic components for our blog, I want to use Git for our source control. So let's initialize this repository, and we choose the folder you want to choose. And now you can see that we have a bunch of changes here, and I would say we commit everything, also stage everything. Let's say this is our initial commit. And now we can not push this to any remote repository, of course. As you can see here, your repository has no remotes configured to push to. So this is just for our local, let's say, control, our local source control repository, so that we can go back, or you can go back if any errors happened, or if you want to try something out. But enough with Git for now. Let's build our basic components. And as you can see here in this, well, advanced graphic, I'd say, you see that we have actually 3 basic components for now. On top, there is the navigation bar and the header, I'd say, of the blog. We will have a simple navigation bar where you can switch between 2 or 3 pages. Then we have the content in the middle. First thing we are going to implement is a list of your posts or your articles. This is what you want to display on your home page of the blog, on your first page the user sees when he or she visits your blog. And at the bottom there will be a footer. Of course, there are other things we can add, and we will add some more things later on. For instance, maybe you want to add a sidebar to your blog, or you want to use some kind of footer for single articles where you see related posts, anything like that. But for now, let's implement the first 3 components, which will be the navigation bar, the article lists in the middle of the blog, your content actually, and the footer. So we go back to the console, and the first thing we want to use is we are going to generate a component, and we can do that by ng-gc, standing for generate component. And the first thing we are going to use is the navigation bar, and we are not going to use tests so far, so we can also skip the creation of these files. Hit return, and the necessary files are generated. Next would be the footer, and last not least the actual content, and for now I would call that the article list, because this is the actual component. This is what it is. It is a list of all your articles displayed on the screen. So let's generate the component article list. All right. Okay, as you can see, the files have been generated here, and in your app module you can see here that it has been changed. These components are also added to the module, and what we can do now is we can remove all that HTML stuff right here. We just for now comment out the router outlet because we're using this one very soon. But what I want to show you is we have the navbar here, and then we have the content here. We will actually use the router outlet soon, and then we have the app footer right here. You see the extensions here are quite handy. Save that, and now we can again run the application, and let's see if the components are actually displayed on the screen. All right, and as you can see, you don't see very much, but this will be your navigation bar soon. Then here will be an article list, and this will be the footer. Okay, great, this works. What we can do now is, of course, commit our code. I won't show you every commit of the code to Git because I think this is quite boring for you. Of course, you can commit your code after every lecture by yourself, or just use it whenever you want to use it. For now, I would say edit basic components to the blog and commit this one. And that's it. Basic components are here. Not very exciting, but I promise you it will be in the coming up lectures. All right, the next thing we can already do is adding the actual routes. But before we do that, I want to add another component so that we can actually switch between two pages, and that should be an about component, meaning this is some kind of contacts page or about page about yourself or whoever is running this blog. So let's generate the about component, and this will actually be, oh, I forgot the S here and skip tests, I see. This will be an actual static page. So of course you could use an API call and get the content for the static page from a database. This will be done by us for all the articles later in this course, not now, but later in this course. Or since this is not really changing a lot, you can do, of course, just use a static page, meaning that you change the HTML in this HTML file right here and say something like, "Hi, I'm Patrick and this is my blog. Thanks for dropping by," or something like that. Let's just delete this file here. Okay, now we have an about page and we have the article list page or component. Now what we can do is we can actually add these two components to our routes, of course, and you can see here that the app routing module is already here for us. And what we can do now is simply add some new routes or path, as you want to call them that way. So this is the first path, and I would say we want to see the article list, and this is why we can use the name articles here. And when the user hits the articles route, then I think you know it already, the component we want to activate is the article list component as mentioned here. And as you can see, it is already imported for us on the top of this file right here. Okay, and the next one is now the about page. And let's say the path for that one is about. And we want to use the about component here and activate this one. And last but not least, when the user hits the empty route, we also want to see the article list. Okay, that's it already for the routes. Now what we have to change is the navigation bar, of course, because here we want to switch between the actual components. So what we can do here is we will add an A tag, but as you might already know, with the routing in Angular, we won't use the href here. We will use a router link. And here, this one would be the articles. And let's say this is the articles link. And then we also have a router link for the about page. And this one's called about. Quite simple. Let's save this one. And now the last thing we have to do is, as you might already remember, here's the router outlet. And now we just comment this one in, cut it here and replace the article list with the actual router outlet. And I think this is already it. Let's run the app again. Alright, and now as you can see here, this is the article list component. The footer is displayed always. And this menu, well, it doesn't look very nice, but you can see in the top left corner of the browser, maybe I open the console here with F12 so that you can see it a bit better. Now we see localhost 4200 articles and here about. And if we click about, the about component is activated, the route changes, we can also go to the articles, and of course we can go back and forth in the browser history. And that's how fast you can implement the routes in Angular. Okay, now this is great, but the blog really doesn't look very nice. So my suggestion is that in the next lecture we will change a bit of the CSS of this blog. And yeah, I hope to see you in the next lecture. I will commit this code now. Okay, let's start with the easy part first. I think this would be the footer. First, I want to change this text here and write something like a copyright sign. And feel free to enter your name here. Or let's say this is me, myself, and I. And for the CSS part, quite easy. I just want to center the text. So let's say text align is center. You see, as you of course already know, that Angular is compiling this on the fly. And when we switch here, we can already see that the footer is now centered, which is really great, I think. Okay, next easy thing would be the body styles. The things I want to use everywhere. So let's change, for instance, the margin of the page, because I want to center everything. This way everything will be centered. I also want to change the max width of the page to 800 pixels. And last not least, the font family should be Arial Helvetica Sans Serif. I don't know how to pronounce this. Sorry for that. And let's have a look at Chrome. Okay. Yeah, that's okay. We're getting there. And now the next thing would be the navigation bar, because this one really doesn't look nice. And I would say first we have to change a little bit in the HTML. So let's say we're using this header tag here. Then we will add a div for the actual title of the blog. I would say my fancy blog, because why not? And we can already set a CSS class here because this is the title. So we also call this one title. So this would be the title of the blog. And now let's use the nav tag for the navigation bar and already give this one a class. For instance, navbar, not mavbar, navbar. And of course we can use the links here now, like that maybe. And what we also can do actually is using a router link here to link to the home page or the starting page of the blog, like that. I think this could work. Let's have a look. Yeah, okay, we are getting there again. So let's style this. So this is the CSS of the navigation bar. And now this will be a little bit bigger. First we had our title, and this one should be a bit bigger. So I would say the font size 2em, the text align, now also center of course, and maybe we add the border. Let's say this one is 1 pixel, solid, and of course I have my cheat sheet here. If you might have already guessed it, yeah, I think that's okay. Kind of gray. And also I want to add a padding with 0.7 rem. Okay. Now, this is not doing the trick, of course. If you have a look here, I hate this purple color of visited links, so we have to change this one. So we go back, and now let's say the A tag for the title has another color, will be black, and we have to use the important command here. And also the text decoration, I don't want to have this underlined, and that's why we are going to use this one here. Okay, now I want to close the terminal here, and we have some more. First the navigation bar. Now it's getting exciting. The font size for the navigation bar would be 1.2 em. Text align would be center. And then we have a color. Also some kind of gray, but I have a hex code here. This would be 6C757D. And then we also have a border at the bottom, same as for the title, solid, and then this grayish color. And last not least, a padding. Okay, I think it's time to look again. We're not done, but soon. Okay, I think now we are really getting there. It's better. We have a nice title, but the links here are not really working. So let's change that. So what we can do now is we add a new class nav item, but we haven't used them here. So let's say this is an item of our navigation bar, as well as this one, like that. We switch to the CSS file and go a bit down. Okay, now we have our navigation item, and this one gets a padding, 10 pixels. Also text decoration should be none, and also we change the color to the one from above. Yep, there it is. And then we also add the you will see the tags for visited links, active focus links, and so on. So let's say visited nav item active, and also navigation item focus is simply again text decoration none, and also we change the color to this grayish, and the last one, when the user is actually hovering over the link, we say that now it is getting a text decoration underline. Okay, I think that's it. Let's have a look. Yes, this is better. So we have our nice header here, my fancy blog, we have the footer, we have the links to the about and articles page, and they work great. Okay, that's it for the styling. In the next lecture it is getting exciting because we are going to create the article class and also create some mock articles. So stay tuned. Alright, so now in this step we want to add the actual article class for all our, well, blog posts or articles. Then we will add some mock articles and add these mock articles to the article list you can already see right here. But before we go to the article list component again, we create our article class by right-click generate class and simply call it article. And now an article of course can have many properties, but we try to make this a bit simpler. So what should an article have is an ID. Then also it gets a title, which is a string. Then a key. And what do I mean by that? For instance, you know, with other blogs like WordPress or any other blog library or CMS, content management system, you see the permalinks. So when you click on an article, you might see that when a blog post is called my first article, that the link isn't some kind of ID, it's called, well, myblog.com/myfirstarticle. And this is what I mean by this key. So we can differentiate between all the articles. It's easier for you and for the user, and it's easier for search engines like Google, for instance. So this will be the key. Now, of course, we also have a date, and the date is also of type date, like that. Then we have the actual content of the blog, which is the whole text you want to write. And also we can add a description. Now, what do I mean by a description? When we show the teasers of a blog post, we can use this text instead of the first 3 lines of the content, for instance. That's it. And in the end, if we want to add a featured image, we can also use an image URL. So we have the ID, the title, the key or the permalink, whatever you want to call it, then the date, the content, description, and the image URL. Now this is our article, and now we can already add this to our article list component. Here we will have a new member like articles, like that. And this is of type article, and it will be an array of articles. And for starters, this is an empty articles array. Okay, so far so good. Now we need our mock article so we can show something on our page. And for that we add or generate a new class, but first we call it mock articles. And instead of actually this being a class, this will be a constant. And we call this articles because it's a constant. And now what we need is, well, articles will be of type articles array. Again, we need the type article, and we start like this. Now this is our array, now it's empty, and now we can start adding some articles. So the first thing is the ID, and this will be 1. Then we need the title, and maybe, as I said, let's just call it my first article. Then the content can be empty for now because we first only show some kind of teaser. Then we have the description. Now we can use the description, and this can be something like, I don't know, this is my first article, it's great, please read it. Something like that, and we have to use the different signs here. Okay. Now we need the key. Now this again can be the permalink, and it can look something like my first article. Then we have the date, which is a new date. And last not least, the image URL, which I've already got that copied, can be this image here. So HTTP, Angular IO, assets, images, logos, Angular, and Angular PNG. I know it's very creative, but it works for now. Okay, and let's add another one so we can just copy all the attributes here. And the ID can be 2. This is maybe the second article. Also a great article. The second article. And later on, of course, we don't have to manually do this. We can, when we create new articles, automatically set the key, for instance, dependent on the title. And let's change the image here to something like this. I think that's it. And yeah, and that's it. These are our mock articles. And now we have to set them in the article list component. So we go back to the article list component, and in the ng on init, right to the start, we say this articles is articles, and we get it imported like this. And well, we don't see them actually on the block, so we have to log them in the console. this articles, and we are done. Everything is saved. If we have a look at the console, it already runs. So let's have a look at the browser. Yeah, already reloaded, perfect. And here we can see now, as soon as we load the blog with the article list component, we see our two articles with the empty content, the date. This is my first article, the description, and so on. Okay, now this works fine. And in the next lecture, we will actually style the blog post or the articles for the article list component so that we don't have to use the console all the time, because I think this wouldn't be that convenient for the user. So we can see the article on our blog and click them. All right, so now let's display the articles on the actual page on the article list component, so we don't have to use the console to see the articles. And the first thing we will do is change the HTML, of course. We can remove this code here, and instead we start with a new div. And what we can use now is the ng4, because we want to go through all the articles in our articles list or array. So let's say that article of articles, and now we have we have our single article, and we can do more with this one. But first let's create another div, and this already gets a class called card. We will implement the CSS card later, but for now I call this card because, well, you will see this in a minute. It actually looks like a card. The teaser of the article will look like a card. And in this card we will have another div with the class which will be the card body. And in this card body then we will add another one, but this time we simply put the image of our article into this div, and the source of this image, you see this is an attribute, so we use these brackets here, and the source will be article dot image URL, and that's our image. Now we go to another div which will be right here. So we add this one, and here we can add the title of the article. Use these brackets here and use the article title. Then down here create another div, and in this div we will display some meta info later on, so we will add a CSS class called meta info. And for now we only have the article date so far, so let's add the article date, and we will use the JavaScript function toDateString, so it looks a little bit better. And then after that we can add the description, and I want to use the inner HTML here, and we say this is the article description. Again, this is some kind of teaser text, so we can add any text we want and don't only use the first 3 or 4 lines of our article content. And then already the last thing is here a link. Of course we will change that. This won't stay like that. This won't be an href, but we can already, just to see how this will look in the future, use this tag and the continue reading class to just style the text continue reading. Okay, this already is the HTML. I'd say let's have a look. It is compiled, it should be reloaded already. Let's go to Chrome, yes. Okay, we can close the console actually. Now what we see here is all the stuff we have added from our mock articles. Also what we see here is that an image is missing. So let's change that. And I think I already know which error this is. Here it is Angular solid black. No. Okay, now that said, this doesn't seem to exist anymore, so let's just use the same image. And yeah, okay, it looks a bit dull, but maybe it should work. So we see the HTML, but of course we can't leave it like that. Well, we could, but it doesn't look really nice. So let's go to the CSS part and add some styling to the article list component. And first we start with the card. So we already added all the classes to the HTML. So what we can do now is simply add all the HTML. First we have a border. And if this is too fast for you, of course, please pause the video and add all the code. And of course, you're totally free to change it. You don't have to use the same CSS stylings that I am using here right now. It is your blog after all. So this is the card. Let's see. Okay, we have a border. That's nice. Now let's get to the card body. Display flex. Now I'm wondering what this is gonna do. Okay, let's have a look again. See, this is nice. So the text is now not at the bottom or below the image. It is now on the right side next to the image. We are getting there, I think. Let's style the title and just give it a bigger font size, like 32 pixels. Okay, how about that? Yeah, I like that. I like where this is going. Now the image can have a maximum height, for instance, maximum height. The meta info. Let's say this is a bit lighter than the normal text. Also gets a margin. Like that maybe. And also a different font size. Let's see. Okay, we have the date now. Got that covered, and now the last class, the continue reading class, and we add the font style again. No, not again. We add the font style, and we change the color to gray. Okay, let's see. Yep. Okay, so we won't get a design award, of course, but I think for this purpose, this is totally sufficient. So we added the HTML for the article list, and we see all the single articles. And also we added the CSS, of course, so that we don't have to look in the console every time. Again, this is our CSS code, and here the HTML code that was just changed. Okay, so far for the styling part of the articles. In the next lecture, it's getting a bit more exciting. We will add the article service. All right, so in this lecture, we want to add the article service so that we get the list of the articles from that service instead of accessing the constant and the list of articles directly in the article list component. But before we do that, one minor thing, I found out what the issue was with the image. Instead of a dash like that, you had to use an underscore for this picture here. Not very important. Maybe you are already using another image of your own, but just to let you know that I have changed the image URL right here. Okay, so now let's get to our new service. We generate a service, simply call it article. There it is. We don't need the spec.ts file, but we need this file here, the article service ts file. And now what we are going to do is simply write a function called get articles, and this one is returning an observable of type article array. And now let's write the body of the function. We will have a result articles again, which is of type article array, and this is for now simply the articles list or the constant articles from our mock articles, and in the end we return this as an observable. That's what the OF is for, and in this observable we send the articles. Okay, now here the article type still seems to be missing, so what we can do is simply again write article, and now Visual Studio Code is suggesting a type, and this is exactly the type we need. So 3 imports or 4, we can format the text or the code here, and yeah, that's already it. This is already our service. So we imported the mock articles, the article type, the reactive.js stuff, observable and OF to return the observable. Now we are going to replace this by an actual web RP call or by a RESTful RP call, and this will of course also return an observable, but if it's prepared like that and return the mock articles as an observable, we don't have to change a lot in the future. So this is our service. Let's save it. And now we're going to use this article service in our article list component. So we go back here, and the first thing we have to do is we need the service here in the constructor using dependency injection. So let's say private article service. This is our article service right here. So now we also have it up here, and now we can use it, but instead of calling the getArticles method from the service right in the ng on init, I want to write another function first, and we call this again getArticles. It's returning nothing, but what it's going to do is it's calling the article service and the getArticles method of the service, and here we are going to subscribe to this method, and the result will be the actual articles. And what we can do with them is simply set our articles to the articles we get from the service. Format this stuff with, by the way, Alt, Shift, and F. And so we get our, in this case, mock articles, but this time from the service. And now the last thing we have to do is replace this code here and simply call the getArticles method from our component right here. Okay, so let's save everything. And the app should still be running. Correct. We open Chrome, reload the page, and as you can see, we get all the articles, but this time from our articles service. Okay, so this works just fine. In the next lecture, I think it's time to be able to click this continue reading link and show the actual article. So we will add a new component, the article component, and show the single article the user wants to read. Now, to read an article, the first thing we need is an article component, obviously. So we right click our app folder, generate a new component, and this component is simply called article. There it is. We don't need the test file again, so just remove it. And here is our component. Now the next thing we can do is not edit the article component. First we can change, as promised, this link right here in the article list component in the HTML. The thing we want to change is this href here. Instead of the href, we will have a router link, and this router link will direct to the following article and key. This is what I was talking all about in the last lectures. So now the link should be the key or the permalink of the actual article we are going through in this loop. And the next thing we have to do is adding a new route where this article key is recognized by our app. So we add a new path and we put it at the end of all the other paths. Just add the key here, and then we want to go to the article component. Now, why am I doing this in this order? It's important to know that when we do it like that, an article can't be called articles or about, for instance, because in this case the path will change. But I think you won't create an article that has this kind of key or permalink. So let's just say if any other path is not matched in this routes array, maybe you have an article with a certain key. So this is why I have this in the end, in the last place of this order or of this array. And there will be one more thing. What happens if even the article key is not matched? But I will show you this in a second. For now, let's test how this works. We haven't changed the article component yet. We just want to see if the component will start. So let's reload the page. And now you see in the bottom left corner that we have the link to my first article, and in this case the second article. And if I click it, great, this works. I see the my first article on top and the article component is running. You see it here with article works, and the second works also. Great. Okay, now to finish this first version, I want to change the HTML. Instead of article works, I want to display the key of the article. We will add the article in the component in a second, but then we have the article available and its key. And then in the component, not in the list component, in this component right here, we want to add the article of type article. And in the beginning, we can just set it to null. And then in the ng on init, we have to look at the route. So I want to use something like this route, but now I need the activated route of Angular. So what we can do is, with dependency injection, we say this is our activated route from the Angular router package. And now we can access the route right here, get to the params, the parameters, subscribe, and then let's say first we simply say this article is a new article, which has nothing to do with the parameters, but now we simply say this article, it has no content at all, but we can, so far we can set the key to the key you see in the URL, like that. And this whole thing has to be an object. So we add the curly brackets and close it with the semicolon. Okay, now formatted, that's it. Let's save everything. App should be reloaded by now. And if I now click an article, I see the key right here. Not article works, but I see my first article, and I can use the routing, which I love, and then the second article. Okay, so in general, we can switch articles, but of course we don't really see the content of the article we want to read. So in the next lecture, we will actually extend the article service so that with the help of this key, we get the correct article from the article service, in this case from the mock articles, later from an API. But for now, it's sufficient to do this with the mock articles. So stay tuned for the next lecture. All right, now to get the single article from the service, what are we going to do is simply add another method to the service called getArticle. And again, we get an observable, but this time just from a single or with a single article. And what is this method doing? First of all, we need a parameter this time, which is the key as a string. And then again, we have a new variable. We can use an array again of articles, but this time it is the articles, the mock articles, and we filter them and say, give me the article where the key equals the given key in this method. And we return the article of the first article of this array. And since we want to return an observable, we use the of command and give me the first one of the articles array. That's it. This is already the method for now. Later on in this course, we will use an API call, and that's why we prepared it with an observable. Okay, now so far for the service. Now we have to go to the article component. And the first thing we want to add here is the article service. So we already have the activated route. And now let's add the article service like this. And this is the article service type right here. Okay, now we got the article service in our component. Now let's remove this line right here. We don't need to initialize the article here, but what we still need is the key as variable. And now we want to access our new service method. So let's just say this article service get article, the single one, and you get the key, and we subscribe to this method. And now we can do something with the result, of course. So we say the article as a result, and set our article of the component to this article. And since we don't have any HTML code for that, let's just say we log the article again to the console. All right, that's it. Save everything, and let's see how this works in Chrome. Okay, page was reloaded. We click continue reading, and there it is. Instead of just faking, I'd say, the key at the HTML, we also receive the whole object from the mock articles right here in the console. You see every property of the article, and the same of course works for the second article right here, ID2, and so on. So far so good. There's only one thing that is not really working. What happens if we want to enter any URL that isn't actually available? We get this error right here. There is no key of undefined. This means that the article we sent from the service, and this one right here, or to be more exact, this one here, because we just say, okay, give me the first one of the array that you find with this filter. If this is not available, it is undefined, and then we get this error. Now, of course, we can fix this. We can just say if the article is undefined, don't do anything with it, just return from this method, and let's see how this works. Okay, it already reloaded, but now instead of an undefined, we get a null. Okay, now let's fix that again. We can just say right here that the article is not null, it is a new article, so we already initialize our article. What about now? We don't have an error right here, but the page looks really empty. The user gets no feedback. And I think this is a problem. We want to give the user feedback if he's entering any URL that is not matched by our routes. We should tell the user. So we should tell him, whoops, there is no article, or you found a dead link, anything like that. And I suggest we simply add a 404 not found page, and this is what we're going to do in the next lecture. Okay, so a 404 not found page. Now what is actually happening there is that we just redirect the user to another page. So first have a look at the redirection. When we go to the article component, right here we just say return and nothing happens. It would be nice to add this redirect first. So what we can do is we add a router. So private router and of type router right here. And then we can add this router navigate by URL. And we simply say, let's use this URL right here. And what will happen now is, if we enter a wrong URL, like the third article or anything else, which doesn't exist and is not matched by our routes in the routing module, the user is redirected to the homepage of the blog. Well, it's still better than getting an empty page, but the feedback still isn't that nice. So let's create the not found component. We go back and right click app, generate component not dash found. There it is. We can remove the test file. And let's already change the HTML. What I like to do is something like h1 and close this again. Well, almost. Something like that. And then we enter a text like you found a dead link, or maybe something like whoops, the page you're looking for doesn't exist. Feel free to change this text, of course. And then we also add a link where we send the user back to all the articles, because chances are that the user actually wants to see one of our articles, of course. Okay, so this is the HTML of the not found component. We don't have to change the TypeScript, but what we do have to change is the routes in our routing module. Now, after the about, we paste something like 404 and use the not found component. And then back to the article component, instead of navigating to this empty string here, we navigate to 404. Okay, save everything and let's test this. Page is reloaded, the third article, and we are redirected to whoops, the page you're looking for doesn't exist, and we can go back to the articles. Okay, now let's say what happens if we enter something like this. Oh, we get another error, cannot match any routes, articles test. Okay, so we are almost there. There's one more thing we have to add to the routes. So let's go back, routing module, let's copy this. We are going again to the not found component, and the path looks something like that. Let's test it again. And the first test, the third article, which doesn't exist, we can go back to articles, we can add something like test here, and now it is working. Our 404 page is there for the user. He or she gets the right feedback. And just to explain, well, this is in essence a wildcard, and we put it at the end because if any other route is not matching, we will definitely match this path here. So we can give the user feedback that whatever he enters as a URL, the user gets some kind of information. Okay, so this is our 404 page. It works, that's quite nice. Now it's time to display the single article actually in the HTML, and maybe also changing the style then of the single article. Okay, so displaying the article on the page finally, and not only in the console of Chrome, what we have to do is, well, it's straightforward. We change the HTML of the article component. So we remove this paragraph here and start by adding a new div. And the first thing I want to show is the featured image. So we have an image tag where we set the source to the article image URL. And pay attention that this is in these squared brackets because this is an attribute we want to set of the image. Next up is the title, there we just use the string interpolation and give it the article title, like that. And then after the title, we add another div. In this div, also string interpolation, and I want to show the meta info, the date, and also use the toDateString method so that it looks a little bit nicer for the user. And in the end, we will add a paragraph, and in this paragraph we will use the inner HTML, or set the inner HTML with the article content. And to be honest, actually this should be it already. Let's just test this. And we go to the articles, and then to the next one. Here we see our image. We can close this, I think. We see the title and we see the meta info, the date. What's missing is the content. So we have no content so far in our mock articles. As you can see here, the content is empty. Now for these testing purposes, I think the best you can do is simply go to libsym.com. In essence, you could already copy this text here, but if you need more or specific words, lists, whatever, you can just change that here and generate new example texts. And so I generated this text here, copy it, and now we can add it here to the content. And we can do the same for the second article. Save it, and let's see. There it is. Okay, so now we can go to the blog. We can click the first article, for instance, or the second one, and now we see our image, the title, the date, and also the content. Well, now this works, but again, it doesn't look very nice. So in the next lecture, we will add some CSS and style the whole thing. Okay, so let's change or add the CSS for the article so that the style looks different. Now, the first thing we can do is adding classes to our HTML of the article. So we start with the image right here. I want to center the image. And to make this possible, we have to add another div first. Let's just move the end tag, and let's give this div a class called article image. Next would be the title. This one can have a class simply called title. Then the date. We already have a class, which is the meta info. And then we have the paragraph in the end, which doesn't need a specific class. We will just use the paragraph tag for this. So we have the article image, we have the title, we have the meta info, and last not least, of course, for the whole article, we also need the class article. Okay, so far our CSS classes. Now the first thing we can do is the meta info. We already have it in the article list component. So let's just remove it or cut it here and paste it into the global styles CSS, so that both components have access to this class. Let's save everything and let's have a look first. So this is our page. We can close the lorem ipsum here, and go to the first article, and as you can see right here, the date is already different. It looks exactly the same like in the article list. So this works so far. And now let's change all the other classes. So we go to the article component CSS, and let's start with the article class. So .article, and we will give this a maximum width of 720 pixels. Then a margin 0 auto to center the whole article. Margin. Next, the article image. This is the div for our image, and we will give this div a text alignment center, so the image is centered. Then we have the title, and the title should just be a little bit bigger, so maybe let's just give it 52 pixels of size. And last not least, the paragraph with a specific line height, and also the font size. Okay, we save everything and let's have a look. Page should be reloaded so far. Continue reading, and there it is. We have our image, which is centered. We have also the whole article, which is centered. The title is bigger now. We have the meta info, and also the text of our paragraph is styled. One last thing I want to do is that in the, let's say, HTML of the mock articles, what we can do is, if you want to have several paragraphs, we can just add the paragraph tag right here to our text. And what this will do, you'll see this in a second. Let's just add another paragraph, and maybe let's do the same for the second article. So we just paste 3 paragraphs, for instance, and save the mock articles. And now you see that we also get this space right here, and everything is styled properly. So this is for now important to add the paragraph tag in the content, so that you can really see that there starts another paragraph in the content of your article. Okay, so when we inspect everything, you see that this is our article right here. If we remove the margin and the max width, you see it looks a bit different. We have the article image, which is centered. Then we have the title with a bigger font size, the meta info, this one right here, and also the paragraphs with a little bit of styling. Okay, so that's actually it. The basic blog works. You can access the list of articles. You see a teaser, the description. You can access an about page, and of course you can add any other page like that. And you can read all the single articles. And also our 404 not found page is working. So far the basic blog is working. Congratulations! Let's sum up again what you have learned and done in this section. And in the next section we will have a look at the meta tags and open graph tags, which are important for the search engines.
Congratulations! Your blog is already working. Of course, there are some parts missing, but in essence, you could already publish this Angular application and you would be able to present your very own blog built with Angular components, routing, services, and cascading style sheets you created completely by yourself. Now let's move on to the next section and add some meta and open graph tags to your blog. Welcome to this rather short section about meta and open graph tags. Here you will learn how to set the title of your blog pages and articles and how to set the proper meta and open graph tags so that search engines like Google and all the social media platforms know what your articles are about. Also, we'll have a look at the Facebook sharing debugger that helps to check if all tags have been set properly. Here you can see how the meta tags look like in the developer tools of Chrome. Let's go. Okay, so first let's add a proper title to our blog. Now when we go to the code, close the console, let's start with the article component because we want to use the actual title of the article to set the title in the browser tab. Now what we need for that is a title service. So let's add title service here, and this is the title package from, or the title class from the Angular platform browser package. So we use this one right here. And now when we get the article, we can remove the logging here and we can just set the, or use the title service and set the title. You see it with the methods that are suggested here. We can get the current title and we can set the title. And now we can do something like that. Simply use this article and then the title. And for the user to still know where he or she actually is, meaning what kind of blog it is, we can add something like this my fancy blog, right? Something like that. So we add the title service, then we use the title service right here to set the title with any text we want. We can save this and reload the page. And now when we move to another article, we see my first article, my fancy blog. And when we go to the second article, we also see this title. Now there's one problem with that. When we use this link, for instance, to get back to the articles, the title stays the same. So what we have to do is setting the title with or on every component that will be used by our router. For now we have 3 or 4 components. I think we can leave the not found component for now, but we have the articles component for the whole list. When you reload the page, we get this title here. We have the about component and also the article component for our single articles. So the article list, the about component, and the single article component. So we go back to the code, and what we have to do is adding the title service to every other of these components. But since I want to add this title to every other title, maybe we can use some kind of service to receive this text and not write it down every single time by ourselves. And when we change it, we have to change it in every component. So let's just add a shared service. So right click the app folder, generate service. Let's call it shared. There it is. I remove the test file. And this one is quite simple. We just add a new variable here, title, or maybe blog title, and this is my fancy blog. Like that. That's already it. Okay, and now in the article component, I can add the private shared service. This is now our shared service, and here we can again use this notation and use this shared service blog title. Okay. Yeah, like that. And now we have to do exactly that for the article list component. So maybe we can just copy the title service and the shared service. So we go to the article list, into the constructor, add it right here, format this thing, and now we have to add the title class and also the shared service class. And we also do this in the about. So in the constructor, right there, we don't need the comma here. But you can also do, when you don't want to click this light bulb here, you can just press Ctrl and point or Ctrl and dot to see the suggestions, and then we can add the title class and also import the shared service. Format this thing again with Shift, Alt and F, and that's it. These are our imports. We can save them, but we are not done. We also need to set the title with this little code here. So in the article list component, before we get the articles, we can add something like that, but we don't have an article title. I just want to set the title with the default blog title, and then we can also write it down in only one line. Copy this thing and also go to the about component, and in the ng on init we can set the title to blog title, but maybe here in this case also write about. So we add another variable for this component, and this is simply called about, and let's use this variable right here, this title and dash, like that. Okay, so we have the title in the about component, we have it in the article component, and also in the article list component, where we use just the blog title and not something like articles, because this is actually also our home page, the first page the user sees. So let's just leave it at the blog title. Okay, we save everything and let's have a look. Okay, reload the page, and there you have it, my fancy blog, about my fancy blog. When we go to articles, we see my fancy blog, and when we change an article or go to an article, read it, we also see the title. And now also we see the history here, so I can go back, use the second article. Now I also should see, when I go back to the articles, that here was the second article I opened. Now there's one minor thing that is getting on my nerves a little bit. It's not that nice. When we reload the page, you see on the top left corner that the title for a second there is still ng blog. Now what's that? Quite simple. When we have a look at the index HTML, this one right here,
there's still the ng block. Well, there's a quite simple solution. We have to hard code it here and simply write my fancy blog again, or any title you want. Make sure to use the same as in your shared service. And now when we maybe also hard reload, to do that we have to open the console, right click and empty cache and hard reload. And now we don't see any other title than the one we want to see, which is my fancy blog. And now the good thing is, when we inspect the page and we see here in the head that the title is my fancy blog, and when we go to our article, we see that the title has changed. But this is not the case in the source code. When we have a look at the page source, you see that the title is still my fancy blog, and this is actually a problem, meaning when we move around in our blog, the title of the actual source code does not change. The user sees the correct title, but the title in the source code is not correct. This is an issue. We will get to that later on in this course, but for now, this is how to set the title of your blog and of every side of your blog. And next up are finally the meta tags, so stay tuned for the meta tags. Before we actually add the meta tags to our blog, let me first show you how these tags actually work and why they are so important. So let's have a look at the Facebook debugger right here. You can find it by Googling for it. For instance, you can just enter Facebook debugger, and there it already is. And don't worry if you don't have a Facebook account, I will show you all the results right here. So now with this tool, you can see a preview of how a shared website will look on Facebook and probably also on Twitter, LinkedIn, and so on. So let's give it a try, and maybe let's just use udemy.com and debug it. Now the exciting part is, of course, first this one right here. This is the link preview. So when you want to share udemy.com with Facebook or Twitter or any other social network, then the result might look like this. You see the image, you see the base URL, the title, and also a description. And now the fun part comes down here. You see all the Open Graph tags that are crawled by this Facebook debugger. We have the URL, the type of the site, which is a website in essence, the title, and so on. And even more interesting are the raw tags down here. And this is what the Facebook debugger gets from the actual source code. So when we have a look at udemy.com and let's view the page source, there we have all the meta tags, open graph tags, and so on. For instance, you see here the open graph title, image, you have the Twitter title even. So this is what the Facebook debugger or any social network in essence needs to access the content of your page and display a shared article exactly like that. Let's use another example. For instance, Angular.io. Let's debug this one. And here you see that we are missing an image, for instance. And this is everything the website or the Facebook debugger gets from the website. And when we look at the source, we see that there's a lot of stuff missing. We have the description, for instance, and this is what the Facebook debugger gets. Although we don't use the open graph description,
the Facebook debugger just takes the meta tag for the description. So it's clever enough to use other meta tags, but if you want to be sure and make sure that the right content is used when sharing an article, or when Google or any other search engine is crawling your website, then you should use the proper tags in your source code. Let's have a look again at the source code now from Angular.io. We have to scroll down for that. View page source. And here you have it. We have the title, we have the meta description, and that is already it in essence. There's not much to see here. So you see the difference. And of course, even this little information can be enough for Google, Facebook, and so on. Maybe for your blog article, the first lines of your blog post will be taken for the description, for example, but it's highly recommended to actually add the meta tags so that you can be sure that the right information and content is shown to the user. For instance, if you don't have an image like here, it's not unlikely that Facebook, Twitter just takes any image of your website, and this one could be very small, then it gets upscaled, it's blurry, it just looks terrible. So this is how you do it. This is why it's important to add the meta tags, and I would say let's add the meta tags right now. So adding the meta tags is pretty straightforward. We have to go to the article component for our single blog posts or our single articles. First thing we need is to add the meta class. So we inject meta, and then the type would be meta from Angular Platform Browser. And then after we set the title, we can already set our meta tags. So this meta, and then here you already see all the options we have, all the methods. We can add single tags, we can even read them, remove them, and also update them. But the interesting part for us, and for this case, is adding several tags with add tags. This of course takes an argument. This argument is also an array, and this array now gets several objects. And now the default meta tag needs an object with a name, and the name in this case can be description. And then we also need the content for this meta tag, and in this case it's article description. Okay, and let's test this already. So save the component TS file, and let's go to Chrome. The page is reloaded. Now pay attention to the console right here. When we go to my first article, in the bottom, maybe you have seen it, there is this meta name description, and now we see this is my first article. It's great, please read it. So it takes the description of the article object and puts it into the description meta tag. That's great. And the description, as I already told you in the last lecture, is enough even for Facebook. Now Google takes it when it's crawling your website or your articles, and Facebook also uses this meta tag if you don't have defined an Open Graph description tag. But let's add the Open Graph tags too, because this is a little different. We can copy this right here, but instead of using the name, we are going to use the property, and we write OG for Open Graph, and then for instance the title. And here we can use, actually we can copy this line right here, because this is the title of our page, just to be sure. And now we can also add some other properties. So, oh no, that's the wrong one. Let's take this one. So we have the type. This is something I want to use, and here you can just enter website, because this is a website. Then we have the URL, and for that I would like to add something to our shared service, because we need the base URL of our blog. So just for a second, let's go to our shared service, and here we can add the base URL, and we add something like HTTP localhost 4200 and slash. That's it already. So let's get back to our article component, and here now we are going to use this base URL and also add the article key, because this is the key, or the link, the permalink, as I said in the beginning, we want to use for our meta tag or the open graph tag. Okay, this is the URL. Another thing to add is the image. And you see now how everything kind of makes sense when you can add the properties, the content of your article to the tags. So the content for this one is this article image URL. Next can be the description again, just to be sure if Facebook doesn't like the other one, but I don't know a case where this would happen. So this article description, and the last one would be the site name, and for that we simply use the blog title of the shared service. Okay, that's it. I think these are the most important ones for now. Of course, you can add properties or tags for Twitter, for LinkedIn, any other social network, but in my experience this is sufficient. If you use these tags, every other social network is fine with that. Okay, so we have saved everything. We reloaded the page already, but just to be sure, there it is, and here you see that these tags have been added. When we go back to articles, reload the page, we see in the head there's only the title, and now when we scroll down and access this article, we see the meta tags. This should work. One thing I just want to mention is when we go back, you see that the meta tags stay on the page or the elements, and when we access another article, we add new meta tags. That's why there are these methods for updating tags or removing them, for instance. But you don't have to worry about that, because when a website is crawling your blog, crawling your single articles, or when Facebook is trying to crawl it when you share the link, then the meta tags will be added only once. So this isn't an issue in this case. But still, there is one, well, not minor, it's rather a big problem when we are looking at the page source. What it looks
kind of different, right? So you only see the title and that's actually it. And even the title is wrong because that's the title of the index.html. So now, currently, when we would publish this Angular app and Facebook is trying to share this page, your single article, then this is everything Facebook would find. So there you have it. This is actually the reason why we need Angular Universal with server-side rendering, because in this case, the page will be rendered, well, as the name implies, on the server, and all the meta tags will be added and you will see them in the source code of your page. So stay tuned, and in the next lecture we will use Angular Universal with server-side rendering. Congrats, the tags are set. You have learned how to set meta tags and Open Graph tags for search engines and social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and so on. The logic behind setting meta and Open Graph tags works. Now the next step is to actually make them work in the web, and that's where Angular Universal comes into play. So let's move on to the next section. Welcome to the Angular Universal section. It may be short, but very important, because with Angular Universal, you will activate server-side rendering. Now, what are the reasons for server-side rendering, you might ask? Well, the first one might be obvious. You added all the meta and Open Graph tags, but without server-side rendering, they won't be available. They might be added to your document object model, but they are not available in the source code of your page. And that's where server-side rendering comes into play. With the help of server-side rendering, your app will be rendered on the server and then sent to the client so that the client receives a version with the complete source code. It's like you would have written all the HTML by yourself first. So you need server-side rendering to make search engine optimization, or SEO, and sharing of your articles possible. And apart from that, server-side rendering increases the performance of your web application on mobile and low-powered devices. You will see that in the performance comparison lecture. Alright, without further ado, let's add server-side rendering. Alright, so now that you know the benefits of server-side rendering, I'd say let's create our Angular app. To do that, we can go to angular.io/guide/universal, and in the past, there you would have seen a big tutorial where you have to do all different steps by yourself, create files, change files, and so on. But now, as you can see right here, there's only this one single command you have to execute in the terminal, and Angular is doing everything by itself for you. As you can see here, they are using their Tour of Heroes tutorial to turn their Angular app into a server-side rendered app, into a universal app. And what it's going to do is it creates a Node.js web server, as it states here, that compiles pages with universal based on client requests. And to create the universal app, we can just copy this command right here, use this icon, and you will see the results already here. A bunch of files will be modified and some will be added, and we will have a look at these files. And I'd say the most important ones, well, every file is important, but the one that is the core, I'd say, for the universal app is the server.js file, which is essentially the Node.js web server. And we will go into a bit more detail regarding Node and Express in the next section when we build the backend by ourselves. But for now, let's just create our server-side app, and there we are. We paste the command ng add ng-universal/express engine, and then we have to change the client project. Here it is
Angular.io example, and you can find the name of your project right here in the Angular JSON file. Here it is, ng-blog. So we just remove this and write ng-blog and hit enter. Now this might take a while, so I will cut back when everything is done. Okay, we're finished. As you might have seen, some files were created and modified. You can see it here in the changes in the source control. The Angular chain, the Angular JSON has got another output file, for instance, and the whole server project was added. Let's close this, and here you can have a look. The package JSON was modified, and here's what I say, the core of the Angular app, a new file where you can actually see, if you have a little bit of experience in Node, the whole Node application. The Express server is started, here's the port, and so on. As I said, Node is part of the next section. And modifications to the main TS file. We have a new main server TS file and a new app server module TS file. And in the modules, one thing which is important is the edit with server transition, where the server app is added. Okay, so we can close this, we can open the console or the terminal, and already the next step would be to start the new Angular Universal app. And we're going to do this in the next lecture. So to run our Angular Universal app, we can go back to the Universal guide, scroll down a little bit, and here you have it. To start rendering your app with Universal on your local system, use the following command. And as you can see here, we are going to run again the serve command. And before that, we actually built the Universal app. And when we execute these commands, we can open the browser tab and navigate to localhost 4000, not 4200. No, instead it's 4000 for the port. And then what we are going to see is exactly the same app, but the difference will be that the pages will already be rendered on the server. And when we will have a look at the source code, there you will see the biggest difference in essence. So we go to Visual Studio. Let me clear this, and now just copy and paste the command npm run build :ssr and npm run serve ssr. So hit return. Taking a little while, building the whole project. Okay, now the project is built, and as the terminal tells us, the Node Express server is listening on HTTP localhost 4000. So we go back to Chrome and let's open exactly that page. So here's the 4200 and we are going to 4000, and there you have it. This is your blog. You can open your articles, you can go to your about page, your articles page, and so on. But now one big difference: when we go to the source code, you see a whole lot more of stuff in the source. And more importantly, when we go to our first article, we have more in the source code. And also we see our meta tags. We see the description, we see the Open Graph type, the Open Graph URL, and so on. When we would do the same with our Angular app, not the universal app, the default Angular app,
which, by the way, we can also run right now. We can just open another terminal and use our default ngserve, and let's add the -- open to open the app in the browser. So what's going to happen now, the Angular Universal app is running, and still we can open the default Angular app with ngserve, which will be then, which is running then on port 4200. And there it is. So now you can compare. We have the localhost 4000, my first article, with this source code. And here we have the localhost 4200. And let's go to the first article and have a look at the page source right here. And here you can see it, a big difference. This is the index HTML in essence that is seen by the browser and by every web crawler. And this is actually the server-side rendered app with all the tags we need and the content, images, and so on. Okay, so there you have it. This is the difference in essence between Angular Universal, the server-side rendering, and the Angular app as you may know it until now. And in the next section now, what we're going to do is going on with our blog. We are going to build the backend so that the articles won't be delivered by the mock articles we have for now. We will implement a Node server, a database, access to the database with Sequelize, so that your whole blog is getting complete. And when we're going to implement all the other stuff, what we can do is still running the default Angular app with 4200, because then the app is going to rebuild itself as you're used to when you make any changes. So stay tuned for the next section and the implementation of the backend. There is one more thing I want to show you before we move on to the next section, and that is a comparison of the performance, the speed, the time it takes to load the page, your blog. You see here we have the localhost 4000 version, the server-side rendering version of the blog, and the port 4200, which is our default Angular app, not server-side rendered. And for this test, for this speed comparison, we can open the developer tools on both pages. And now, as you can see here, I'm already on the network tab and I haven't filtered anything here. So you see the whole content that is loaded. When I now reload the page with an emptied cache, I see the load time is 288 milliseconds for the server-side rendered version. And here, when I reload, it takes 1.24 seconds. Let's do that again. .21, and here 303 milliseconds. Now, when you look at the numbers, it already is a difference, but I think the difference is clearer when we change the network speed, and we can do that by going to this drop-down, throttling, and change it to, for instance, fast 3G, which is maybe the situation you are not connected to Wi-Fi and surfing the web with your phone. So fast 3G for the server-side rendered version, and also fast 3G for the not server-side, the client-side rendered version. So let's have a look. We reload the page. Takes a little bit longer. We have 3 seconds, and here it is a big difference. You see the page is still wide and we have the fast 3G. selected here, we can even go to slow 3G, which can take minutes to load. As you can see here, the vendor.js, for instance, takes lots of time, and that is the, well, significant difference in essence. 25 seconds to load the whole blog, which is really not much. 2 articles, 2 images, that's it. Of course, you can always repeat this test, and you see here, while this page is still loading, this one here, the server-side rendered one, is finished in 3 seconds. And even slow 3G, when we reload the page, it takes 6, 8, 9, okay, 10 seconds. 10 seconds compared to this one, which is in the fast 3G version, 25. When I change that to slow 3G, it can take minutes to load, but I don't want you to wait so long. So just test it by yourself. This is one big difference I wanted to show you. So you see the server-side rendered version is much, much better for your mobile users, for instance. Okay, that's it. So let's move on to the next section while this is still loading. Perfect! Server-side rendering works, and your efforts of adding tags to your articles will pay off. With your added tags and also the increased performance, your web application will perform better with search engines and also your visitors. Regarding the next sections, we will still use the client-side rendered application because it's not necessary to see the tags, for instance, locally during the development process. But at the end of this course, we will publish this application with the server-side rendered version, of course. Now it's time for the backend. Welcome to the Node.js section. In this first backend section, we will create a new project only for our web service. We will build the first REST API calls and use these new implementations in the Angular client. Additionally, we will install nodemon for our development process and also cover the topic cross-origin resource sharing. Let's go! To start creating our web service with Node, we create a new project, and in essence this means we are creating a new folder. As you can see here, I have created a folder ngblog server, and in this folder we will create a new file right here and call this file server.js. And what we can do now is actually already implement the web service. But we are going to use the Express framework, so we can do something like const express is require express. But since this is a new project, we have to install the Express framework first before we can actually run this thing. But just to show you, let me finish with the implementation. We're going to run the service, and then you will see the error that is actually coming up. And then after that, we're going to install Express. So we have our Express framework right here, and we are going to start our server app like that. So we initialize our app with Express. And then already we are going to start our server, which is running on a certain port, which is, in this case, the default port is 8000. And then we also give this method a callback like this. And then we can do something like console log server is started and listening, like that, for instance. Okay, that's it. This is the start of our web service. And when we now go to the console and want to start our service with node server.js, then we get the error I was talking about, cannot find module Express. And this is why we have to install it. And we can do this with npm install express. And keep in mind, if we would have added the server.js to our Angular project, to our Angular application, Express would already be installed. So since we're going to separate the projects, we have to install it again. But I think this is good practice to separate both sides of the application, the front end and the back end. And in this case also it is a good learning experience. So hit return npm install express. Now some modules are downloaded. As you can see, this is pretty fast. We have a new node modules folder right here and also a new package log JSON. And now let's let's try it again with node server.js. And that's it. Server is started and listening. So this is the start of our web service. What we can do now is also check this whole thing into a source control, into Git. But before we do that, I will stop the service and also copy the git ignore from our client application. This one right here, just right click and copy and go back to our server application, paste it right here, because now we have an ignore for the node modules, for instance, and this is not going to be checked into our Git repository. So let's go to the source control and we can pick a workspace folder to initialize the Git repository. In this case, it's ng-block server. And now we can enter a message like creating the web service, control return commits this whole thing. And again, we cannot push it because we don't have a remote repository configured, but still, in our case, this is sufficient and it is nice to be able to go back and see all the steps in the source control. Okay, that's it for the beginning of the web service. And in the next lecture, we will already implement our first API call. All right, so now our first API call. Let's close the git ignore. And here is our server.js file again. And this is pretty straightforward. Again, we use the app, like in line 5, app listen. Here, in this case, we want to use one of the HTTP methods for our REST call. And as you can see here, we have, for instance, a get call, post, put, also delete, which would complete the whole CRUD operations. But of course there are other things like patch, for instance, or maybe the options call and so on. But to show you the first call, we can simply use a get call, which is the easiest and simplest to use and to explain and also to learn. So what we do now is we enter the resource, actually, the URI, uniform resource identifier for this call. This is, if you want, the address you can use to access this call and the data you get from it. And this is pretty plain simple, just the slash. And later on, what we will do is, for instance, if you want to get the articles, we will do something like this, articles, and then maybe also the name of an article, like my first article, and so on. But this is for a later lecture. For now, just to show you how the server works, we use the slash for the resource. And after that, we need a request handler, which is in essence just a function. And this function takes two arguments. The first is the request object and the second the response. And now let's get to the body of that. We won't do anything with the request for now. You can use it to access the header, for instance, or the object which is in the request body if you do a post, for instance. But for now we do a get, no request. And the only thing we want to do is, as a response, we send
a text back, for instance, hello Node.js, like that maybe. And that's already it. Now again, we can start our server. It is listening. And again, the only thing we did is writing this get method with the slash as the resource and this function here, and we send back a hello Node.js, and we can test this with Chrome. So we don't need any other tool. Maybe you have heard of Postman, which is a great tool, but in this situation we don't need it. The only thing we have to do is we access localhost 8000, hit return, and that's it. This is our server we want to exit. And again, if we open the developer tools and reload this whole thing, we can also see the access, the result right here, and this is a preview of the response, and this is the actual response. Now the status code here is 304 not modified because it was already loaded, but if we hard reload the whole stuff, we get, apart from this funny error here with the fav icon, which we can ignore for now, we get a 200 OK. So this means everything is fine. The response is hello Node.js. Our server is working. So let's move on to the next lecture. Now there is a module we can install to make our lives easier, because maybe you've seen it already. What we have to do is we have to start the Node server by ourselves every single time we make a change to our code. So we have to stop it like that with Ctrl+C, and again start the server if anything is changed. It's not the same as in the Angular client project where the ng-serve is watching the changes and restarting by itself, but of course there is a solution for that, and this solution is called nodemon, and we can Google for it. And there it already is. This is nodemon monitoring the changes and restarting the application by itself. And as you can see here, there's only one command we need to install this thing. So let's do this right now. When we're here in the terminal, just paste it, npm install -g, so it's installed globally, nodemon. That's it, it is done. And now instead of node server.js, we just write nodemon server.js. And as you can see, the output is a bit different. We can still restart it manually by typing rs, but this thing is watching now. And for instance, if we just change that to a creative one in the end, you've seen it, it was restarting the server. And when we go back to localhost 8000, reload the page, now we see the one. And of course we can change this again, still restarting. Let's go back to Chrome, reloading the page, and the one disappears. So this is just a little helper for our future implementation, so we won't have to restart the Node server by ourselves. Nodemon is helping here significantly. Alright, so we have our test call right here, the slash as a resource, and it is returning just a hello Node.js. But now we want to get our articles. And since we want, of course, build a more or less clean structure of this server project, instead of just adding another get call right here into the server.js, what we can do is creating a new file in the root folder and calling this articles.js. So we have an articles module. And because it is a module, what we can do is we can say module
exports. And here we can define what is actually exported, and then we import it into the server.js, because the server.js in essence is the starting point, the entry point for the application, for all the API calls. So we have to load the article.js file into the server.js file. And we can do this with this command here, or with this code here, module exports. And what we want to export is a function. And this function gets an argument, which is in this case the app, the web server app, if you want. And this is our first implementation of the articles.js. This is, for this starting point, everything we need. And in this function here, we will define other functions, which will be all the API calls. But first, what I want to do is already add or import this articles.js into the server.js. And this is again done with the require command, or the require function. And what we can do here, you see Visual Studio is already suggesting our articles.js file. I just add the JS. And then right here, I can add the app that is needed by the articles.js. Okay, now the server knows our articles.js. This is fine. And now we can start implementing a get call. And this looks exactly the same as in the server.js. So we start with app get. And in this case, I'd say we want to get all the articles. And again, we need a function with a request object and a response object. And that's our body of the method. We close it right here, open this thing. And now what we can do is again send a response back, send like that. And just for testing purposes, let's say we send back an empty array, not as a string, really just an empty array. Let's save this. Everything should be started. And now let's go back to Chrome. Node server is running. And now, as you have seen, the URI is different. Now we can go to articles. And this is our empty array right here. The response, this is the preview. Everything so far works just fine. But again, of course, we want to get the articles. And let's do that right now. We will just switch the mock articles from the client application to the server. So what we can do here is creating another file, the mock articles.js, which is again a different module. And this time the articles.js file needs to import the articles. And what we can do is just say, similar to the client application, we have the articles array as a constant, and this time we require the mock articles, close this with a semicolon, and we send back the articles. And now this wouldn't really work because the mock articles do not export anything. So what we have to do here is module exports is an array. Again, if we save everything right here, reload, nothing should change. As you can see, the console even tells us that nothing was modified. But now let's just copy the mock articles from the client application to our server application. So we have the array here, and we go to the server application like that, format the whole thing, And this should be it. The server is restarted. We go back, reload it, and there it is. We have all our articles, the whole 2 of them. And when we have a look at the network tab, we see the response right here, and here it looks a bit prettier. These are all our articles. So again, just to recap, what we have done is we created a new module or a new file, the articles.js file. We export this module into the server.js or import it in the server.js file with this line here, require articles.js, and we give the app, this app here, into the articles module, and with this app we can access all the API calls or all the methods we need from our Node or Express app, the get, the post, everything else. And additionally, we created the mock articles.js, exported our mock articles right here, and the articles.js is getting them and putting them into this constant articles. This constant you already know from the client, but now everything is received by our web service. And that's how the whole thing works. So in the next lecture, we will implement the method to get a single article. Now this is pretty straightforward. What we have to do now is just writing another get call. So we can start again with the app and get. And now regarding the URI, we again use the articles because this is our resource. We want to get a single article, and of all these articles, we want the one with a certain key. And with the colon right here, we can define that this is a parameter. So we can use the key in the function body we are going to write right now. So let's define another function with a request and a response. Like that. There's the body. And in the body of the function, again, we send something back, of course. But in this case, we access the articles array and we filter. And we say of all the articles, give us the article where the key is equal to, and now this is exciting, the request. This is our request object of the function. Params, because now we have parameters, and the key. And of all these articles, give us the first one. Now this is maybe a little bit hacky, but the filter method, this one right here, gives us an array back or returns an array, and what we want is actually just the first result of that array, because we know that in this case there should only be one article that has this certain key, so we can return the first result of that array. So again, to recap, we have a get call, we have another identifier, articles, and then colon key as a parameter. And right here in the body of the function, we can access this parameter with request params key. And we want to get the article that has exactly that key, and we return the first one of the whole array. Okay, we save that. And again, we can test this with Chrome. So we have all the articles here. And now what we can do is, there it is already, articles / my first article. And this is then the identifier, the URI we want to use. And as you can see, it already works. This is the result. And to see it a bit better, we can see, or we can have a look at the developer console, the developer tools. And here in the preview, you see the whole article with the content, the date, everything you have already seen in the client, but this time from the server. And of course, we have the second article. And in this case, similar result. And what happens if we enter a key that doesn't exist? We just get nothing back. There is no article. So that's fine. This works. And I'd say now it's time to make changes to our client application where we actually see the articles on our blog. All right, so let's go back to our client application right here. And what we want to change here is the article service. As you can see here, we already returned observables, and this is pretty handy because now we don't have to change a lot. But first, we have to inject the HTTP client of Angular. So let's say private HTTP, and this is the HTTP client. And pay attention that it's not the auto import from Selenium WebDriver. It has to be this one from the Angular Common HTTP package. And also important is when we do it this way, we have to add the HTTP client module right here in the app module TS file. It isn't here yet, but here under imports, we can simply add a comma and add HTTP client module. This is the correct one from Angular. Hit return, and it is imported right here from the Angular Common HTTP. Okay, we can save this file and also this file. And now we have access to the HTTP client, which means that we can do REST API calls. And to do that, we can actually remove everything right here. And we start with a return statement. And then we say this HTTP get. Again, you may already know it. We have all the possibilities here, as you can see right here, patch, post, put, delete, and so on, but we need a get. We can also define the type we want to get from the service, which is an article array in this case. And now we have to enter the correct address, and this one is HTTP localhost port 8000, and now articles. That's it. Okay, let's save this, and we have to start the application, ng serve, and let's open it. Okay, the app started, and as you can see, this is not really the expected results. Let's open the development tools and open the console, and as you can see here, there is something wrong. And the thing that is wrong, and you also might have already heard of, is the CORS policy. This simply means that the origin that is asking for the articles is not the same as the server. So the server address is different from the client address, and since Chrome is blocking this by default, we have to allow the access from the localhost 4200. So again, the origin of this client application is not the same address as the server application, and this is why it's blocked. We don't have an access control allow origin header. Funny thing though, if you reload it and go to the network tab and filter the XHR, which are the XML HTTP requests, we actually see the result. So we get the articles back, but we won't display them on the page. Now, before we fix that, let's implement the second call. You can close the terminal, and actually what we have to do is just copy this one right here and enter it for the single article. Now we want to get a single article, not an array. And right here, we just add the key that is given right here. So we return again an HTTP GET with an article and not an article array. The address or the URI is a bit different. We have also the articles, but we add the key right there. Let's save this again and let's have a look. Again in Chrome. Now that's our articles. We still get the error right here and the result right here, which failed to load. Maybe this time it works. Yes, now it works. And when we want to access a single article, remember the route is different. We don't have to add the articles and then the key of the article. We just enter the key of the article directly, and for instance my first article, and here we actually see the result, but again the console is telling us that the course policy hasn't been found, or it just says that this has to be blocked. Again, we can reload the page and here is the error. Okay, now one thing I still want to do before we fix the whole thing, we don't need the mock articles anymore. So we can actually remove this file so we can clean up the whole stuff a little bit. And let's have a look. This is now compiled, but there should be an error. Yeah, right here we have the articles imported. We don't need them here, and I think we also have them right here. And also, I'm not sure if we have them here. No, this should be it. Let's save everything. Compiled successfully. And again, of course, we have this issue right here, and in the articles also our course issue. Okay, but the client, in essence, it is implemented now. We have in our article service the call, so we are getting the articles from the service, but now we want to display them. So in the next lecture, we are finally going to implement the course policy. Okay, now to fix the course issue, we go back to our server application, and we have to start by installing the course module. So we have to stop the server, and what we can do right now is simply npm install course. Okay, now this was fast, and now we have course available. As you can see it here, the differences in the package log. There it is, our course package. And now in our server.js, we can add the course finally. So const course is require course. This is our module. And now we have to give them certain options, meaning we want to define the origins that are allowed to access the server and get the results and display them on the screen. So what we can do here is simply say var course options, and here we define the origin, and this can be an array, and in our case this is HTTP localhost 4200, and since this is the default Angular app and not the universal one, we can add the universal one as well, which is simply another port, the port 4000. So this way we can test both applications and we don't need the semicolon here. Okay, now
this is the definition of our course options, and now we have to tell our application that it should use the course policy. So app use course and with the certain options. And that's it. So we imported the course module and then we define some course options right here. And there's this little typo. And now Visual Studio recognized that this is actually used. So imported course, then we define the course options right here so that the origin can be localhost 4200 or localhost 4000 for the Angular Universal app. And later, of course, when we publish the whole application to a server, we have to change that. But for now, this is totally sufficient. And then the last part is to tell the server app to use the new course policy with the correct course options. Okay, so let's save this. And now in the console, we have to, in the terminal, we have to start the server again. Started and listening. And now let's try again. Hard reload. And there it is. These are our articles. Wonderful, but still there is a strange error. The date to date string is not a function. What does that mean? When we go to our client application, this is just a minor thing in the article list HTML. Somehow this method is not working anymore, the to date string. There is a quick fix. We can just use the pipe of Angular and tell the whole thing that this is a date and that this should be formatted as a date. And we can also do the same thing in the article component. So we remove the to date string and just use the date pipe right here. And let's see, is this still running? Yes, it is. So it should be, yeah, already reloaded the whole thing. Now we can close the console and you see that when we reload the page, we actually get the articles now from the server and also the single articles right here. And just to check, in the network tab, when we reload the page, we actually get the second article right here and also the whole article list right here. Wonderful. So this works fine. We implemented the basic server. We made some changes to the article or to the client part, to the client application, especially to the article service right here. And also, of course, we have implemented the first version of our Express server and the web service with API calls with a somehow clean structure right here. Now, of course, the question may arise, okay, why should we do this since we are still using the mock articles? In essence, we just move the mock articles from the client application to the server application and getting them back. Well, of course, for now, this doesn't change much, but in the next section, we are going to use the database finally and return the articles from the database, and then the whole thing makes sense. We have our client application that is accessing the web service, and the web service is getting the articles from the database. So stay tuned, and I see you in the next section.
Great, the basic web service works. You learned how to build your first REST API calls to receive articles from the service. You integrated these calls into your Angular client application, and you now know how to run the web service with nodemon so that it restarts by itself when you make any changes to your code. And you configured your web application for cross-origin resource sharing, or short, CORS. Great stuff! Now it's time to add the Maria database and object relational mapping with Sequelize in the next section. Now if you made it this far, you are definitely ready for the complete Angular real-world web app development course on Udemy. You seem to have what it takes to build a real-world web application completely by yourself from start to finish. In the next sections of this course, you will build the communication with the Maria database and use Sequelize for the object relational mapping. You will implement an administration dashboard with all CRUD operations. You will also add authentication to your web application with JSON Web Tokens, utilize HTTP interceptors, Angular route guards, build a small middleware, and finally publish everything to a Windows server with IIS Node. As a thank you and also as a reward for completing the first sections of this course, I want to give you a pretty sweet discount. Make sure to use the link in the video description below. I'm looking forward to seeing you again in the course.